I'm in my room. My computer is on in front of me with my microphone. There's a notepad open with some notes about my podcast. It's time to rewind. It looks like they're on the 11th scene of Memento that starts in color at 21 minutes and 52 seconds with Teddy popping in front of Leonard's car and ends at 25 minutes and 41 seconds with Natalie grabbing Leonard, saying, "You don't remember me, do you?" There's also a Skype window open. Oh, hang on a moment. Who is this?
Bubba! It's Eric Deutsch again.
Oh, sorry, I seem to have forgotten. And who are you?
I'm Chris Nelson, and I'm so happy to finally understand what this tattoo I have across my chest that says "It's time to rewind episode 11." So glad to finally have figured out what that means.
Oh, I assume that I have already told you about Memento then. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump right into this scene. I love one thing that I love about Teddy as a character is he always seems to be like just popping in from out of nowhere. Like literally in this scene, he's just like pops in from off screen right on Leonard's the hood of Leonard's car and just, his quintessential Lenny.
Well, and it's such a great juxtaposition from the last episode that we had Chris on for, right? Because he's so jovial here. He's practically goofing on Leonard. It's too bad we all know what's going to happen to him. We all think what we currently think about him as well. And here he is just, being this kind of wacky friend.
Yeah, Joe Pantoliano is great, and I think I read today that he kind of pitched to Nolan the idea of him just like literally popping into these scenes like that, which is great.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. I know that like just yesterday I watched the Anatomy of a Scene, which is one of the special features on the special edition DVD, and he mentioned that he suggested the glasses coming off of his face in the opening scene, so that way that kind of dulls the goriness of that opening moment a little bit. So it's not like you're and like basically instead of having a hole in his head, you have the bloody glasses that's got knocked off his face. But yeah, and Joey Pants is almost the best part of this movie, I feel like. And even though at this point he was really almost kind of typecast as like the friend who betrays you at the end, especially because this movie came out just a year after The Matrix. And he played a very like not exactly a similar character, but kind of a similar character. And so like if you're watching this after watching The Matrix, it's like you expect Teddy to be this jovial character that betrays him in the end.
Yeah, he definitely does kind of. I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, but he does seem like the kind of actor he is like him in every movie, right? Where he is that kind of character. It's not like you see him do a whole wide array of different types of characters. He does seem like, from my experience, he plays that character who's like, might betray you at the next opportunity.
Yeah, and this is one of the many moments that I love him so much. I mean, this is where I got part of the opening and closing of this podcast with him coming in and always saying the Lenny. Then although I'm almost disappointed that we don't get the him correcting him saying that his name is Leonard in this scene, and instead we just get Teddy, reminding him that his name is Teddy, which kind of clears him up that, again, that this is like really efficient storytelling, because just with that bit, Leonard realizes that this is somebody that knows him. And so his next line is, "I guess I've told you about my condition." And again, the other great line, "Only every time I see you."
Yeah, he honestly has some low key like funny moments in this movie. You know, some partially kind of like comedic, almost lighter parts in the middle of the movie.
Yeah, there really is a lot of comic relief spread throughout this entire movie. It's something that I had almost forgotten because I remember all of the funny bits, but I forget how often they pop up because this, you think of Memento, you think of, this is a serious, almost like artsy fartsy film because it's all about this ground. I mean, this. I don't really want to say groundbreaking. I don't think that's the right term, but this, impressive storytelling technique with this chronological puzzle that's the way it's put together. But it does have a whole lot of just lighthearted and like laugh out loud funny moments sprinkled throughout it.
Yeah, definitely.
One of which I would like to say happens once they go into the diner and Teddy is eating his soup. There's an incredibly loud, obnoxious slurp with his soup, which is, usually played for humor. But also, I just would like to know what kind of soup Teddy's eating because his spoon has this gigantic piece of what looks like seaweed hanging off of it.
I
And
don't know,
so
spinach maybe. Yeah, I don't
is
know.
it spinach? I mean,
I don't know.
it doesn't look. It's almost like a gray leaf. It doesn't look appetizing, basically. And
It's almost like a miso soup, but that
yeah,
does
I
not
was
seem
thinking
like a Japanese diner.
yes, that's exactly what I say. The only thing I could think of that had seaweed in it is miso soup, and that is a diner, and I would not order miso soup in just a regular standard diner.
Yeah, it's just your classic Americana California diner that serves miso soup.
Yeah, but like right before that, again, I really want to point out that right before he gets out of the car, you get to see Leonard's motion, like his habit of checking his pockets for his Polaroids. But at this point, this is the 11th scene in the movie. That at this point, the the audience knows about his Polaroids, so the filmmakers doesn't have to show that. It's like, but I like the fact that they show him going through the motions of grabbing for his Polaroids. So if you notice that, you know exactly what he's doing, and you don't have to see it again.
Yeah, I don't even think I noticed that necessarily, but that's great.
And I think it's funny that the last time you were on, we were talking about his tattoos, and he had the big tattoo that said "eat," but we don't see him eating in this scene. He's just playing with his napkin.
Yeah, I don't. Do we ever see him eat? I mean, he's got bigger problems, I guess, but yeah, I don't think he's eating enough for sure.
He
It's
does have a
bad
bowl
tattoo placement.
I think he has a bowl of the same exact thing that Teddy's eating. He's just not eating it.
He's forgotten what miso soup is. He's not into it.
And again, I like as they're talking, I like the reinforcement of the Sammy Jenkins story because we basically just heard that in the previous scene, in the black and white scene. And so this, reinforces that. But again, we don't need to hear it again because as an audience, we just heard it. But it also really tells us a lot about the habits of Leonard. That this is a story that he tells often, and it also kind of shows us the relationship between Teddy and Leonard, and that they do have this long-term relationship. That Teddy has heard the Sammy Jenkins story many times at this point.
Yeah, which means he clearly like indulges him a lot. Like it's not like he shuts him down every single time. They've obviously been through a lot of things together, and he kind of just lets him go a lot of the time probably.
Yeah, and then Teddy, then immediately like switches gears into John G and has this moment of empathy. It feels like, and I'm curious, like, do you think that this is like true empathy from him, or do you think this is somehow part of his plan? Because throughout the majority of this film, at least the color scenes, Teddy's goal is really to get to the car, to get to the money in the trunk.
One of my notes here is that I feel like Teddy seems to genuinely feel sympathy for Leonard. And I think he does. I think you can kind of take the Teddy you see at the end of the movie at face value almost. I mean, I feel like he's using Tim to his, for his own purposes, but at the end of the day, he's also seems to be trying to help Leonard and give him what he thinks Leonard wants, right? And just kind of sees it as a mutually beneficial situation. And I think he did think, maybe he'd be able to help him snap out of it, or that he would remember, and that he would be satisfied at the end of the day. So I kind of do feel like I don't really feel like he's necessarily playing him in this moment. Like when Leonard says he ruined my ability to live, and he's like, you're still alive, like I feel like he genuinely feels that. That's just my take.
Yeah, I mean, Teddy says in a very serious tone that actually doesn't fit in with the rest of the way Teddy is in this particular scene. You really want to get this guy. And at this point, the viewer still thinks Teddy's a scumbag, and still thinks, Teddy's the killer.
The audience thinks at this point that Teddy is the guy.
Right, exactly, right. So it's a very interesting choice for the line delivery. For like, there's a lot of sympathy in there, and like, boy, I really feel bad how badly Leonard's life is, and potentially even, the role I'm playing with it,
Mm-hmm. And they both also have lines that really tell us a lot about their own characters, and they might not even realize it at this point, because, right after Teddy feels his pulse and says, you're living, and Leonard says, only for revenge. And that is, I think, truer than even he realizes at this point, because he has been living only for revenge for who knows how long. And it's revenge on multiple different John G's that change every few weeks or however often.
Right. He's not living for revenge for like his wife's killer. He's living to almost he's living to just do this as like just kind of his one pursuit. Like he almost just wants to keep doing it. It almost seems like by the end of the movie.
Yeah, it's like the fruitless pursuit of revenge, and that tends to be true with a lot of revenge stories in general. Just how revenge tends to be a pointless task. It's something that you can never truly achieve, and this embodies that concept within Leonard as a character, because it's literally something that he can never trually achieve.
Sure, probably the most famous example is probably Moby Dick, right? The whole book's about Ahab looking for revenge on the whale. Look what happens at the end of Moby Dick. It's just it destroys him and everything around him. So he's just he has no life, Lenny. It's just his whole entire life is seeking this never-ending quest for revenge.
Mm-hmm. And on the other side of things, Teddy is telling Leonard about this guy that's trying to get him to kill the wrong guy, and he's literally talking about himself at this point.
Right.
Because that's basically what Teddy has been doing for how, like, from the point in time after they caught the initial John G up until now, and we don't know how many John G or James G's there's been between then and now. And then it moves on to this discussion about notes. Teddy says that notes are unreliable, and you can't trust someone's life to all of your little notes. They could be unreliable. And Leonard's argument is that memory is unreliable. And again, I think Leonard's words are very important, as he talks about facts, not memories, because he uses the word facts, and that's something, like, out of all the tattoos that he has, fact is the word that's on his body the most, because it's on there at least 7 times.
Yeah, part of what he says is memories can be distorted. They're just an interpretation. They're not a record, and they're irrelevant if you have the facts. And this is the crux of the whole movie here, because his
Mhm.
memories are distorted. They're his interpretation. They're not a true record, and he has the quote unquote facts tattooed on him, which is what he blindly follows. So, this is the whole entire basis of what happens in this movie boiled down into this one speech here.
Well, and I
Yeah.
feel like this shows, in this scene in particular, he's so confident and so naive about his process. He talks about valuing facts over memories, and he's right about the memories portion in the sense that, yeah, I mean, when you remember something, you're rewriting it and things get distorted, right? But he also is like, oh, if you have the facts, it doesn't matter. And I guess that might be true in theory, but he very rarely has enough facts almost ever, right? He's
Mhm.
the facts that he sees whenever he gets his bearings are sometimes not facts at all. Sometimes he completely misinterprets them, right? So it just kind of shows that, yeah, I mean, maybe what you think is your system could work ideally, but it's clearly not working because I think he's a little overconfident in his system.
Yeah, I think a good way to describe it is that, all the facts are pieces of a puzzle, but he's always only looking at some of the pieces. And he can take some of those pieces and rearrange them to fit a certain scenario at that point in time. But then some of the pieces get lost and then he finds other pieces. He's never able to really look at the entire finished puzzle. Can only ever keep his mind on a handful of pieces at a time. And and you can shape those pieces into many different truths.
Right.
And he's just so dismissive of the things that Teddy is saying in this scene also. I mean, just,
Mm.
Teddy's trying to get through to them here, and it's just, he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. He's not interested at all in what Teddy has to say there.
Yeah, and something that's kind of hinted at but not really discussed is, memory is easy to manipulate by other people, but if we find out that his notes are just as easy to manipulate as someone's memory, and in certain ways, his notes are easier to manipulate than somebody's memory. And I also like that he ends that moment with he says, "That's how you investigate. I know that's what I used to do," and that really helps shape him as a character because he did used to be that insurance investigator, and that's where he developed a lot of the skills that he has in terms of investigating, and he's very confident in his abilities as an investigator, and that kind of leads him into the wrong direction in certain ways. And one other thing that I thought was a fun little moment that I saw in that anatomy of a scene on the DVD is one thing that Joe Pantoliano talks about in terms of a potential loophole is that there's a lot of times where Leonard basically leaves his car unattended and Teddy's not with him. And so you might think, well, why doesn't Teddy just like break into the car whenever Leonard's not around? And Joe Joey Pants's reasoning is that he thinks that Teddy likes Leonard too much to do that to him.
I mean, Teddy clearly does like Leonard. I mean, for whatever happens in this movie, at the very least, Teddy absolutely likes Leonard.
Yeah, and then we get another moment of habit whenever Teddy asks Leonard where he's staying, and then he immediately goes for his Polaroids and sees the picture of the discount inn. And this is another moment that really shows the relationship and the length of it, because he realizes that he doesn't have his key, and Teddy jokes that he probably left it in his room again. And again, it's a quick line, it's a quick throwaway line, but it really shows that they have been in this friendship for a long time. That's something that's happened many times. That Teddy's used to it by now.
Yeah.
And then we move into the discount in front office, and just another quick little subtle moment of comedy as he tries to push open the pull door.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I was confused by that. Did he? I mean, because not confused, I should say, but that seems like something he would have experienced before the injury. So I'm a little disappointed in Leonard that he had trouble with the pull door.
Although for me, I'm somebody that unless it's like an older building that hasn't been retrofitted, that I always think of like in terms of fire safety, all exterior doors of businesses should be open out.
Right.
So that way, if there's if there's a crowd inside and there's a rush to get out, then you're not stuck by having to try and pull the doors open in a crowd of people. You can push them out, and so the crowd will flow out in case of an emergency. And then there's another little subtle moment of acting, like whenever he walks in, he readjusts his suit, like he just puts his hand inside his jacket of his suit just to kind of readjust it. And it's something that you definitely wouldn't notice on a first time viewing, but whenever you watch it multiple times, you realize that the reason that he does that is because this is not his suit. This was not made for him. This is actually Jimmy's suit that he's been wearing. And so of course it's not going to fit quite right.
So you're right. That's definitely something you would not notice on a first time watch, but once you know the whole picture and rewatch, that that's a great little detail.
And I was going to say he also, every time he talks to someone for what he thinks may or may not be the first time, he adopts this much more chipper, smiley, upbeat attitude. He did it with Teddy at the beginning of this segment, and now he's doing it here with the hotel employee.
Yeah, especially because it really does feel like almost a completely different character as he goes in and he does the whole shaving a haircut with the service bell as just directly in front of Bert.
Do you think that's related to him, like when he talks about Sammy Jenkins later, like in his faking the recognition? Do you think it's just about being as kind of putting on this friendly persona because he doesn't really know what he's walking into with every conversation?
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but I think that does kind of fit. And again, that does puts that another connection between him and Sammy Jenkins. The fact that that was something that actually called Sammy Jenkins's story into question for him, was that, and every time he met him, he had that what he thought was a flash of recognition.
Right.
And yeah, I could see that that's something that he puts forward as a front, that just because he knows that he has this condition, and so he tries to act normal as much as possible.
Yeah, not that he's trying to fool someone and pretend that he doesn't have the condition, because he'll freely talk about it and he'll lead with it, but that he's trying to it's almost like he's trying to be charming in a way.
And then we also get this moment of recognition, or this level of familiarity from Bert, where he just says, "Hello, Leonard. You left your keys in your room again." And then we get this other nice bit of comedy as he goes to take him to his room, but he sends him into the wrong room. And once again, Leonard goes straight into detective mode as he sees the bag and recognizes his handwriting. And as he holds it up to the camera to show the audience, we probably recognize that bag as the same bag that he used in the black and white scenes earlier.
Yeah, this is just a great. I mean, there's not that much going on here in this minute or so at the end of this segment, but this is just such a great thing. I think Chris made the point of how there's not really too many likable people in this movie, and here we go. Even the affable hotel employee is doing the bidding of his boss and renting him multiple rooms so far. to just get as much money out of him as they possibly can.
And I think my favorite thing about the whole thing is that Leonard is not, he doesn't get angry, he doesn't get offended or mad. He just like, he almost is like, well, I guess, that makes sense that someone would try to do that to me. Like,
Yeah, it's like, all right, you got me. You got me.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite lines of this movie where he says, "At least you're honest about ripping me off."
Right.
And then Bert says, "Well, you're not going to remember this anyways." And then he says, "You don't have to be that honest, Bert."
So, which in that line brings me to a question, because I've seen this in places as a plot hole, and it kind of rang true as a plot hole to me, even though I guess technically we don't see every it's not like a real time, every second of every scene kind of thing. But the fact that he calls him Bert is very interesting, because he doesn't seem to have a name tag. He doesn't say his name in this scene. So it's kind of interesting that they would have Leonard's character say his name, because you very easily could have done that scene and said that line without his name on the end. So I found that very interesting that he said his name. And it almost on the surface it seems like a plot hole that Leonard would know his name. If obviously he doesn't. When he walked into that situation, he didn't know who he was or know anything about him.
I think I can no prize that by saying in the time it took for them to walk from the office up to the room, he might have said, "My name's Bert."
Yeah, no, it's certainly explainable. This, like I said, it's not obviously a real time kind of situation. Right. I just thought that was interesting that that they, because to me, I don't know if, I guess it adds like a friendliness to the line, but it's also not necessary to the line. Like, I think the scene would have played out the same way if he said, you don't have to be that honest, the same way, right? So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and do you think that Bert plays it off on his boss? Do you think that he actually told his boss about this, or do you think that this is actually Bert's idea and he's just trying to shift the blame so he doesn't look quite as bad?
Oh, sure. I shift blame to my boss all the time at my job.
It makes sense either way. I mean, yeah, I could see it either way. Like, to me, it's a total toss up. Like, it does sound like something that if he has a boss, that boss would do. But it also is like, well, I know this guy's going to forget about this exchange in a couple minutes. So yeah, why make it as awkward as I have to, right? If I don't, why tell him that this is my scheme, that I'm just screwing him over? Why not pass the blame to some figure that he's never going to, remember?
Yeah. And then we get this handwritten note on a pharmacy bag. And what do you think about the fact that he trusts this note, which is, it's clearly not in his standard handwriting, because like the meat is in more of a script. It's really like a jumble. It almost looks like, that the top part looks like it's written in crayon and the bottom half looks like it's written in marker. That he actually trusts this note, and the fact that it says today. It doesn't have a date. It just says today. Does this seem like something that Leonard as a character would trust to be accurate?
I mean, he seems to trust things that he personally has written. Is that it? I'm trying to remember. Did he write that, or did Natalie write that?
I think Natalie wrote it.
Oh, Natalie wrote it, so it's not his handwriting. Yeah. So he really shouldn't trust it, Because
it's not his typical handwriting either. Yeah. Because like I said, like the meat is in a script and everything else is in print. Which looking at it, it's almost like a weird hodgepodge of, like, I don't know what she wrote this with. Or if, she added, like, some of it was written down already and then she added to it. It's really kind of a weird note. It's just so messy, which I guess it's supposed to look messy. And I think, from my point of view, I think the only reason that he does trust it is because he has the Polaroid of Natalie.
Right. Why would someone have let him take a Polaroid if it's someone who he couldn't trust?
Right.
Oh, yeah. What a mistake.
And then this is another moment, like, I want to say this is the first moment where we actually see him forget in real time, as he he looks at this and then he's like, what time is it? 1 o'clock. And then he, runs off because of this new piece of information to meet Natalie and completely forgetting about the fact that he was there to get his key.
Right. He forgets that. And then he also, I think I mentioned the last episode I was on how quickly he gets distracted by things, and when Bert says, always get a receipt, you should write that down. And he's like, oh yeah. And he's like, I'll write that down. And he immediately like sees the Natalie thing. It's like, oh wait, never mind.
Yeah. And then we see him going to the diner, and I didn't double check with the last color scene, but this is the part in the movie where they're starting to trust us a little bit, and the scenes that we get at the beginning and ending aren't 100% the same, because this clip at the beginning of the previous color scene, there is an extended bit in the middle in between whenever he pulls up in the car and whenever Natalie grabs him, where in the previous scene, we actually see him looking at the back of the Polaroid and reading it. And there's a little bit extra. And then this is like the truncated version. So it's like, it's really just starting to give us the main beats just to remind us of what we saw at the beginning of the previous scene.
Right. And I don't necessarily know if that's because I know I remember reading that they sometimes use different takes for the different times they would show a certain scene, right? And it's because memory is kind of rewrites itself and gets distorted. But I think it also is probably also just more of a practical movie making like aspect of you don't literally have to show us the same exact thing over and over, right? Like you get that truncated version. So I think you're probably right about the trusting the audience at this point.
I haven't seen it happen yet with like the different takes or anything, and then it's kind of hard to tell jumping back and forth. But I do know, or I'm fairly certain, at the beginning of the movie, they do like the scenes that are repeated at the beginning at the end of each of the color scenes are 100% the exact same. And then as the film goes on, then the later repeated scenes, you get more variations and possibly like the alternate takes, like you said. And this one, it's the truncated version, because it does two things. Like you said, it has this aspect of memory being fallible, but also the audience is like that in the beginning. It's like they have to train the audience of what the pattern of this film is, and then once you get the pattern, you don't have to be strung along as well, and you can just hit the beats, and that's enough to say, yeah, this still fits the pattern. That's the end of my notes. Do either of you have anything else that you want to say about this scene?
My only other thing is just this subtle moment. I like at the very end how he's walking by, and I just think it's a nice bit of physical acting there. How Carrie-Anne Moss just very subtly reaches, grabs his sleeve, pulls him over. It just always stuck out to me for some reason. I'm not even really sure why. She's looking there. She's trying to look kind of incognito, although sunglasses inside makes her kind of stand out. She's not entirely sure what to expect from him at this point. Once we'll see later on in the movie why. And so she realizes that he is indeed clueless about her, and just this really nice, where are you going?
Yeah, it's like she always, she kind of feels a little bit like Leonard pre-injury, where she knows that he's telling the truth about his condition, but there's always this little bit that wants to test his condition at every chance that she gets.
Yeah, I don't think she has the sympathy that that Teddy does. She just kind of like when she goes off on him later in the movie. I know she's trying to get him angry, but I also feel like she's just kind of like letting loose. I think she has her own problems. I don't think she really feels like she cares much about him and his situation.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps up this scene. Thank you, Chris, for joining us yet again. And since this is your last scene here this season, is there anything else about Memento that you wanted to touch on while you're here?
Well, I just think, I mean, it was cool so I rewatched the whole thing for this discussion, which is, it'd probably been years since I'd seen it. Like, I know I saw it when it came out, and I've probably seen it, at least another time since. But it was a fun rewatch. And it's funny how maybe it's more so the later viewings, once you kind of know what you're getting into with the way the narrative is. It's amazing how much it flows together, even though it's being told backwards. Like, all these color scenes are just going backwards. So but I guess it's almost because it's like a loop, right? Like, he kind of always does this before. So you're just seeing like one chunk of a loop, like one example of a loop, but it's something, this is kind of the way it goes for him, right? So I love the way it's crafted, and it's amazing how much it works. Like, how easily, I mean, not saying it's easily, digestible, because I can't remember on first viewing, especially as like a dumb teenager, I was probably a little confused, right? But it's like I was saying, it's amazing, like, how well it works, like, even as a story pretty much told backwards, how much it all makes sense in the end. And then the only other thing I wanted to point out, which is in a scene that I'm not covering, is, I think at the end of the day, right, you feel like, Leonard's a victim, obviously, but he's also turned into a guy who's not a very good guy. And if there's one thing that tells me he's not a good guy, or that he might be a little crazy, it's that when he's in Dodd's hotel room, he takes a shower by stepping into the shower and then turning it on and letting it hit him full blast in the chest. And that's not a thing that any normal human being has ever done.
I read a lot of the kind of funny internet lists, and one of them is like, stupid things that I didn't realize until later in life, and one of them was somebody saying that to their friends, don't you hate whenever you take a shower and the water is cold for a few minutes before it turns hot? And they all looked at him like he was an idiot. It's like, you just wait for it to get hot and then you step in. It's like, oh my gosh.
I mean, maybe they're just trying to use the water. Like, you don't want to let the water run for a couple minutes, right? That's just they're just being green, I guess.
All right, but that wraps up another episode here. Thanks again, Chris, for joining us, and thank you, as always, Eric, for being my co-host through the color half of this movie.
I hope I remember to even show up for the next episode. I'll have to tattoo on my instead of eat like Leonard, I will tattoo record on my.
Yeah.
Yeah, that won't be confusing
and
at all.
the little record symbol. Like a little red circle with a microphone next to it. And as always, I am Bubbawheat, and your host here on this show. And you can find me on Twitter, where I'm at Bubbawheat. And you can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can join that to discuss episodes as they come out, as well as other time loop properties. Anything is welcome there. And by the way, have I told you about Memento?
Every time I see you.
He destroyed my ability to live.
You living?
Only for revenge.